So, welcome everyone as we are here right now to process this. Oh my gosh, what an amazing day! It was so rich. We went through culture and how that deals with justice and leadership. Then we climate and business and hold leadership. I just and then to bring it to education, which is very close to my heart because I work with educators. But I don't want to totally hoard the beginning of this. Trey or Barnaby, whichever one of you want to go first. First I should say this. We had talked about this before because we knew the day was going to be so rich. And we were like, okay, how do we make sense of these varied areas of exploration? And we thought we'd bring it back to the dinner table or the supper table, as we call it in the South. And what are the essential ingredients? What are the essential ingredients to embody the change from justice to leadership? What are the essential ingredients to embody the change from justice to leadership? So, the three of us are going to talk about that, but we're also going to, as we're talking about that, we want you to think about it because at some point we're going to ask you to please drop into the chat because today is just giving us so much to look at. Because, as we said in the very first practice, today was the day where we brought the work to the people, the boots to the road. How do you actually do this in education? How do you actually do this in our communities? And so each of us has pondered this question for a day or so. And Trey had this poem he wanted to share this morning. So I want to ask Trey to share this poem. And if you want to say something about yourselves, and then Barnaby, if you want to say anything about yourself, or if you want to name an essential ingredient, now we've gone through the day. There was what we said before. Now we've gone through this rich day. So I don't know how your mind has processed this now. So I really would like to give each of you this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sister Charisse. I appreciate you. All right, it's potluck time, y'all. We bringing our essential ingredients to the table. Um, so as we dine, as we start to cook, maybe I will set the tone, maybe ask the blessing, if you will, over this meal that we're preparing with a letter, with a poem that I wrote. It's a poem called Dear Grandchild, and it's a poem that I wrote to my future grandchild about what we did in the present day to pass on a better world to them, really embodying that practice of freedom dreaming in a creative way. So it goes, Dear Grandchild. My grandchild, by the time you read this letter, I hope that you are living in a world much better than the one that I write from. We have a lot of problems. I don't know if in my lifetime we will resolve them, but that's why I wrote this letter to you, because you are the entity that gives me energy to keep defending this world and these truths we hold as self-evident, even when we're told we're irrelevant. Because every day we see pain and we hear cries, and some still turn a blind eye. I despise and deplore how much we ignore. It's like we're in a room full of elephants. But I'm telling this story because I want you to understand how this world once was, before we took a stand, before we made our demands. Do not take for granted what we did to make this world a better planet. Because my grandchild, in our time, we learned the greatest superheroes were not the ones we read about in comic books. They were the ones that lived in us. We took a look and thought of you, the future generation, and chose to use our gifts to be a suture for the nation. Our world was divided. The separation was creating violence, deep silence, and dehumanization. but we would end these issues we were facing with a radical love and courageous imagination, because history would be repeated unless we learned and worked to defeat it. So we dedicated our lives to treat others the way we want to be treated. We didn't want any of you to ever know our sorrow. Though it's true that nobody knows tomorrow, we have to do our part to make it better than today. We have to change our hearts so we can live a better way. And lastly, my grandchild, you cannot let no. You cannot play a part in the cycle of oppression that has made this world a mess right from the get-go. Greed, evil, fear, any feebleness leading you to do evil, just let go. Because you cannot get no satisfaction if you continue that course of action. A love for hate can be a fatal attraction. People will say your problems are too big. It's you against the world. What you gonna do, kid? But once your whole life has passed you, in the end, we're gonna ask you what you did to take a stand when the future was in your hands. So you have to do all you can to give the next generation a better world than you had, like we did for you. Love, Granddad.
Trey, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
The poem, similar to a lot of the spirituals that I've had the privilege of growing up hearing, as Jess talked about earlier today, I've seen the message of it becoming more and more relevant over time than even when I first wrote it. And so it was an honor to be able to share this piece among this community at this time in the context of all we've discussed. Because now that after the blessing has been shared, I think the ingredient that I would love to bring, the ingredient that we discussed so much throughout this time, was the importance of hope and how important it is for us to have hope and have practices that can help us maintain hope. And even learning how a lot of the actions that some are taking to harm others and harm the environment and harm the planet are a result of a lack of hope that they have and a pessimistic outlook. So this whole experience just reminded me, all the sessions, all the conversations, the importance of being able to maintain hope during these times, because that's an essential ingredient for us to continue this this monstrous work that so many of the ancestors before us paved the way to help us continue. So,
Hope is an act of revolution.
mm-hmm.
It is not something somebody gives you. Hope is something that you have to fight for and maintain regardless. And as a people, we know that. As all people, we know that. But we definitely know that as a people. Okay, Barnaby, he just struck my heart. I had to say it. What can I say?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You said it beautifully, Charisse. Yeah, well, I want to just bring back Kyra Duolingo's phrase that she said at the top of the session she was in. We're here open-hearted with each other. And I appreciated the presence with which she shared those words and the simplicity of those words. I think to me, they also speak to humility and the intimacy of not knowing that we are here in this moment together, a moment that has never arisen before. And as she also touched on, we don't know what is going to emerge here together, but the important thing is we're here together, open-hearted. And from the session where we got a chance to connect a couple of days ago, that the ingredient for me was imagination. And that has been inspired by both the Jungian alchemical tradition and very deeply the Islamic Sufi imaginal lineage, particularly of the great sage Ibn Arabi from the 13th century. But Trey, I loved how you said the phrase courageous imagination. And that's really what it is, because we know what imagination is as simply fantasy or distraction. But I feel like it's so important in our contemplative toolkit to further cultivate an understanding of what Henry Corbin said, which is the heart is the organ of active imagination, which is another way of saying courageous imagination. And the word prophecy came up earlier. So Ibn Arabi, again, speaking from the Sufi tradition, would say that when we can see and receive divine insight through the heart, when we do that in a deep way, we're not prophets in the way that the great prophets of the ages were, but a true dream vision has a fraction of prophecy. It's a very specific number too, a 146th or 147th, I don't remember. So this is incredibly powerful, that our calling is not to be prophets, but we can enact prophetic vision in our lives, personally and collectively. So that's the ingredient I want to bring in, is the courageous imagination.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Barnaby.
Courageous imagination, which to me relates to in the beginning when Trey was talking about what is it that our ancestors imagined hundreds of years ago in an environment that it was impossible to know, to dream that the three of us, that this group of people right here are sitting here having this in conversation on this instrument. They could not even comprehend that, but yet their hearts had the imagination, like Resma was saying, because they tended to what they needed to tend to. It allows us to do this today. So, what are we tending to allow Trey's grandchild's 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 grandchild to be able to do the work they need to do? Now, I have a couple of different hats. I have a couple of different names. Charisse Minerva is like my professional scholar, philosopher, educator, professional name. But I also go by Minerva Trueheart. And Trueheart is my grandmother's name, who was indigenous. So I'm a multimedia artist, musician, poet, vocalist, storyteller, danced for many years. That's why my knees don't work so good right now, but that's not slowing me down any. You have to learn that as you start aging up in the years, you just keep going, you know? And I was so interested in that last session. Rob Roser knows about this. I work with whole school mindfulness, and we have mindfulness directors in schools from pre-K to college. We've tightened our focus, but that's what we have been. The organization is 6 years old, and we work at the intersection of justice, education, and mindfulness. So today to me was so relevant, and I even saw that some of our mindfulness directors were here. And what they were talking about, what happens on the classroom in real time. You do have to listen. If you're going to bring mindfulness in the classroom, you have to listen to the children. You have to listen to the people you're bringing the teachings to, or they're not going to eat the supper. You have to open up into relational mindfulness. So, what does this mean to me? Community. Community is the necessary ingredient. Historically, on this track, and because we're in this Western society, we have pretty much gone down this individualization track. This, and I'm not saying get rid of individualization, because practice for self, practice for others, practice to connect to nature, practice to live. Because all of life, you are contemplating at every moment. You washing that dish, you washing that cup. Did I get the inside? I'm contemplating. I'm fixing this dish. Did I add the right spice? I'm going into this community. Am I just going to go in there with my little bag and bring out my script of lessons and tell them to practice? Or am I dealing with a group of athletes? Or am I dealing with a group of doctors? Am I in the Appalachian Mountains? Or I'm in the projects that are around the corner from where my house is? So, yes, the lesson is fundamentally the same, but the community I am serving dictates how I am in relationship with those people. And I even believe as we're really mindfulness for the masses, that is my slogan. Building community. However, what I'm really saying here is taking the time to go on the front line. Go and even work, be on a line where they're feeding people. If it's your church, work with a group of the youth. If it is working with homelessness, if it's Christmas and I'm going to do something in the hospital, go into that front with the awareness I am practicing. Bring that practice to community. And like Doug said, when you do that, it lessens the oppression. So perhaps this time is bringing out our strengths and asking us a question of what does it mean to have humanity? I can remember, and I'm going to stop talking in a minute, but the people in Gaza, they made a song out of the tone of the sirens. The sirens that were sounding, they made a song out of it to lift their spirits. What are spirituals? These are songs that slaves made to carry them through their hardship. We have always found joy in hardship. That is a human capacity. We should not forget that human capacity. We have to tap into it. And the way we tap into it, the ingredient I bring to the table is community. I'm inviting my brothers and my sisters of all colors and diversity to come eat with me so I can see what your food tastes like.
For embodying change, we bring in hope, we bring in courageous imagination, we bring in community. I also added a little bit of joy because I thought that was also another thing that came up. And so as we continue the conversation, we invite folks to continue to type into the chat what y'all bring into the potluck, what y'all bring into the table. And then we'll talk a little more about that. But thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to bring up something that was a little bit of a tension for me. And I say this as someone, the foundation of my practice was from the Buddhist tradition, and it's probably still my home base. But I thought it was very interesting that in a contemplative conference, now I might have missed it, but I didn't hear until Rob mentioned near the end of his session the word God. And the reason I want to name this tension is because what I perceived was that in the way we translate the Buddhist tradition into secular and scientific culture, we use words like attention, awareness, if we want to get a little more non-dual, presence, and of course, compassion. But what it made me think of was the great one of the great bearers of the Zen tradition to the West in the 20th century was D.T. Suzuki, and he was particularly known for transmitting the knowledge of the Zen tradition. But particularly later in life, as a personal practice, he also oriented towards the Shin Buddhist tradition, to the Pure Land tradition. And what he perceived was that, now, sometimes Zen would be framed as self-power and the Pure Land tradition as other power. And I feel like much of what has come up today is grounded in this language of self-power. What is my practice? What can I do? What am I not doing? How am I uncovering my shadow or not? But I think, and as T.T. Suzuki said, and of course, as is so emblematic of the Abrahamic tradition, this other power, what is the complementarity of this self-power and this other power? Because I feel like we're leaving potentially a personal shadow if we're not exploring both of those. And I certainly feel like there's a cultural shadow, because many of us who engage with, let's say, Buddhist and other Eastern traditions did not feel at home in the Abrahamic traditions or didn't feel the life in it. But I feel like for me, relearning the language of the Abrahamic tradition is infusing my spiritual life so that I am fluent in more than one language. So I wanted to name that tension. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point you bring up. You know, this is what's happening in the mindfulness movement. It's spreading out now, and it's hitting a lot of different cultures. And it's hitting a lot of different cultures that are neither Buddhist or Abrahamic. So then, which to me, in some ways, is the benefit of the Western pedagogical language, because it allows discourse across multiple traditions. I can talk to indigenous, I can go out and talk to, there's this commonality of language, but I understand what you're saying is you still want to respect certain traditions. I am glad to hear Rob bring up God, but I'm also glad to recognize there are many traditions that are not God or Buddhist, and that there are atheists and agnostics that also practice. So there's this tension. I totally agree with you that we have this tension now, that now we have to work this out and start discussing it. Maybe because we have to do that, it's bringing more people to the table. That tension is a benefit. It's a monster. It's a gap. It's a crack, as Bio talks about, right? Um, Poetry, I see you. I feel like you have something you want to say.
Yeah, I'm definitely resonating with this conversation for real. Just to give context for folks about who I am, because I kind of just went straight into having fun with the arts and the storytelling. Um, I forgot to reveal my secret identity. So my my name's Trey Carlisle. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, and I work, my 9 to 5 is serving as the program director for a nonprofit called Music in Common. And this is our 20th year in existence. And we curate experiences for people across social divides, whether it's race, religion, culture, politics, etc., to find common ground through music and through facilitated conversations. And we use music because it is very much this universal language and this human practice that all humans across cultures engage in. And we found throughout 20 years, it's actually a really valuable way to facilitate and mediate conversations around pressing issues by bringing folks, to your point, Charisse, who normally wouldn't necessarily come to the table or even know of each other, bringing communities together to have healthy facilitated conversations. But I digress. In relation to this conversation about being able to translate these teachings, um, these bits, these gems of wisdom that is contemplation, that different spiritual and scientific and wisdom traditions throughout history have tapped into in one way or another. I agree. I think during the times we're in right now, it's going to be a really important practice. This is maybe another ingredient that I would add to the pot, is being able to translate and speak the language of those who are different from us. And this really gets back to what you were talking about, Minerva, about knowing the community that you are working with and their specific experiences and being able to meet them where they're at. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and so my life was being exposed and being raised by people of all different cultures, backgrounds, sexualities, identities, etc. And having that upbringing and now working in the field of bridge building and peace building, I'm constantly reminded about the importance of being able to translate these bits of wisdom, these themes, these insights that different human communities have tapped into for thousands of years. But sometimes we don't recognize that we're saying the same thing because we use different words and we stop at the label and the words. Or sometimes we're talking about different things, but they can be really complementary if we're able to integrate and put these things together. And so lastly, to wrap up my point, getting back to the concept of the monster and the monstrous. One of the new stories that I'm writing for Poetray's Place right now is this character named Sanko the Scarecrow. And he's a scarecrow, and he's made up of different pieces and different aspects of, just as a scarecrow is. It's made up of different pieces of things that are disregarded or no longer exist. But when you put together, you create something new. It's like a hybrid. So Sanko, his name Sanko means Sankofa, which is the principle of going back and get it. He embodies literally how do we integrate wisdom from the past that is helpful for us, that can still serve us? How can we let go of things in our traditions that are no longer serving us? And how can we make space and make room for the new things that we need to embrace and cultivate? And he embodies this type of practice within their own cultural traditions, but also through pulling and integrating bits of wisdom from other cultures and from other people and other backgrounds. Now, this is an invitation that all of us as human beings are invited to do. And I think that practice of integration, bringing from diverse streams, that's essential literally to the well-being of everything. That's how nature is often maintains health and well-being. That diversity is the way our body works. That's the way our gene pool works. Integrating wisdom and beauty from diversity is key. But in a lot of cultures, that looks monstrous. That looks dangerous when we are made up, composed of different pieces. Frankenstein literally is composed of different pieces. Sanko is composed of different pieces. And so I love that we're having a conversation about how doing this work in communicating these teachings of wisdom to people of all different backgrounds and having to do the work of translation and integration and collaboration, how that work, while it does seem beautiful and noble and loving because it is, it's also in many spaces seems as monstrous, seems as dangerous, and seems as threatening. And so how can we do what we need to do to tend to ourselves, care for ourselves, fill up our cups so that we have the energy to continuing to do this work of integration and bridge building? This literally, for me, it is literally the same ingredients we shared. Joy is key.
Gotcha.
So doing things that can bring me joy, which I think is different than happiness. I think happiness, in many times, it's that feeling, it's based off of what you experience. Whereas personally, I define as joy as this sense of awe and gratitude and seeing the beauty in everything, even when you're feeling every emotion. It's like an umbrella that can contain multiple emotions. And so having practices every day where I can practice joy and experience joy has been essential in helping me continue this work.
One suggestion, how to fill up your cup?
There's something I just want to drop in because we had some intense themes earlier, themes of things getting worse,
Yes.
right? Potentials for collapse. And I remember a story, Wynton Marsalis, his mentor, Albert Murray. Marsalis was developing a theatrical piece about the history of the US, which was very centered in the Black tradition. And he had a tragic ending. And Albert Murray was giving him feedback on this. And he said, you know, I really think you need to have the ending be one of hope, because tragedy is an artifact of the European mindset. And
Wow.
now Murray wasn't an essentialist, so I don't think he would say that in every conversation, but he said it to Marsalis that way. And so I just want to be really watchful and mindful of it's even as Rob was saying about AI. Once we start saying AI is intelligent, once we start keep having conversations about collapse, what are the conversations we're not having? You know, so I just want to bring it back to you, Charisse and Trey. How do you hold these warnings and concerns in a container of hope?
Herbie Hancock, a jazz musician, has this amazing book. In this book, he's talking to our mentor, and he says that jazz was born out of the oppression of slavery. And it is this amazing art form. However, this art form has gone all over the world, and every culture practices jazz. So its root can be in something, but that's that collective human consciousness that we are all connected to. So here I am, my closing point. It's called Reflections. Atrocity, animosity. Can't you see the insanity? Me too. You three. First Nation plantation reflecting collective exploitation. Fists be raised, be praised. Hope stays, won't be erased by 400 years, 10 trillion tears, overcoming all fears. We unite as peers from every sphere to realize dreams and schemes, themes of a world united. Cross nation and nature, gender and color, plant and water, minds and faith sing hallelujah. Ocean waves break onto a new day, a tomorrow grown from the blood and ashes of today's madness. Yes, our 2020s welcome a new tomorrow of peace. Ashe.
Mm. I am so filled with joy right now for this sense-making session and how it's helped us to, I feel like I've really landed with everything that came up as a result of this. It felt like sitting around the dinner table and talking with friends. So thank you so much for that. I'm ending the day with certainly holding a lot, but with a lot of delight. So thank you all so much. I'm going to end with just a few comments about our day and also just some expectations for tomorrow. As we come to the close of the second day, I just want to thank you for your presence, for attuning, listening, imagining. We've explored embodying change, moving from justice to leadership, entering the cracks, the gifts of the monster, facing the shadow, integrating all the parts of our individual and collective selves, even the things we don't like, becoming like a mushroom, composting, a mycelial network, embracing the mystery, becoming homo mysterious, and opening to courageous imagination, curiosity, creativity, kindness, love, opening to joy. These are the ingredients we need for this meal we gather to eat together. And the most important ingredient is community. And should hopefully connect us with love and inspire us to be of service and connect us to a deep sense of perhaps even the spiritual and ourselves as spiritual beings and how we make meaning. Opening up to maybe our monster also being our salvation. I'll end with the words of Octavia Butler. Kindness eases change. Love quiets fear. And a sweet and powerful, positive obsession blunts pain, diverts rage, and engages each of us in the greatest, the most intense of our chosen struggles. May we be in this struggle together.